Betrayal trauma is betrayal at the hands of somebody you trusted. When we go through betrayal, there's not one drop of our lives, and I mean spiritually, financially, physically, there's not one drop of our existence that's not touched.
Hurt begets hurt, right? So what are they getting from it, the betrayer?
People with wounds are the ones that have affairs. I've never worked with somebody that had an affair that was happy, healthy, and healed.
What steps should someone be taking if they can acknowledge and recognize within themselves that they have a situation where either they know they're being betrayed or they've been in this active betrayal blindness?
You have to make a promise to yourself that you don't take one iota of a percentage for somebody betraying you.
Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset, everybody. My name is Stacey Urig. I'm your host, and today I am joined by Mr. J. He's a certified betrayal trauma practitioner, an intrapersonal relationship coach, veteran speaker, author, and fellow adoptive parent. You guys all know my kiddos are adopted. He's got a background in education and a deeply personal mission to support healing. He helps individuals and couples move through the painful aftermath of betrayal toward breakthrough. And in this episode, we're going to talk about what betrayal trauma is. You guys have heard me talk about trauma for 145 episodes, but we've actually never talked about betrayal trauma. So I'm really excited because it is different. And I want you guys to have a good understanding of what it is, what it takes to recover, and what it takes to rebuild a life with more peace, purpose, and more importantly, trust. How are you?
I am magnificent. Thank you for having me on, Stacey.
So excited to have you. So let's just start right at the beginning. You know, I am a trauma care practitioner. You're a trauma care practitioner. My expertise and kind of subject matter expert is in the areas of things like ACEs and unresolved complex PTSD. Yours is betrayal trauma. What is betrayal trauma?
All right. So I can give you a definition, which I will, but I'd rather give you an analogy if you don't mind.
Cool, yeah.
I want you to imagine that there is a bridge a mile above the ground, and that bridge is fairly thin and it's a mile long. Okay. And under this bridge are volcanoes and fires, blazing fires and volcanoes under this bridge. You're at the beginning of the bridge and you have to walk across the bridge to get to safety. Okay. Now, on your bridge, just imagine you said you had two children. I want you to imagine that you have one in each arm. Okay. You got one child in this arm and one child in this arm, and you need to walk across that bridge. Now, you start to walk across that bridge with the things that mean the most to you in life. But the burning beneath you is so hot that the soles of your sneakers, you feel it coming through the soles of your sneakers. Now, as you're walking, the smoke is so thick that you can't see in front of you. So what you do is you reach out and you put your hand on the shoulder of the person that you trust the most in life. This is a person you trust more than yourself at times, to lead the way. And as you are, your eyes are blinding, you can't see, your eyes are closed, you trust them more than you trust your own self with your own life. You got the two most precious things in your hand, in your arms, and you're slowly inching away. And before you know it, the bridge collapses and you are falling, and you got the two most precious things in your arm. Your mind is hijacked. You're looking down. You can't even look because there's a fire blaze in your eye. You're trying to look around for what to grab onto, but there's nothing. You know, once you hit the ground, you're dead. And you're thinking, how am I going to take care of my children? How am I going to keep them alive? How am I going to keep safe? How am I going to do this? Whatever. And you look up in the bridge and you saw the person that you loved and trusted the most has a hammer in their hand. They're the ones that made the bridge collapse. Now you're in primal panic. You're completely, mind is hijacked. Then you hit the ground and you die emotionally, physically, mentally. I'm sorry, mentally, but not physically.
Yeah.
That's where you have to, that's where I come in. So now let me tell you, I talk with people that are 30 years out of betrayal, that are having effects because they never healed. And I talk to people that just discovered, the lipstick in the glove compartment, or the numbers under the mattress, or the hair on the car seat, or on the seat of the car, who are literally hugging the toilet, vomiting.
Yeah.
Because there's a physical manifestation. So So the definition of betrayal trauma is it's betrayal at the hands of somebody you trusted. It's a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, and it certainly is a disempowering because you are living by one set of rules, assuming and thinking and counting on the other person living by the other set of rules and discovering they weren't. And it completely ravishes your mind, body, and soul. I say all the time, if you take a pond and you throw a big rock in the middle of the pond, there's not one drop of water that's not affected. So
Right,
when we go through betrayal, there's not one drop of our lives. And I mean spiritually, financially,
right.
physically, there's not one drop of our existence that's not touched. Now, I just want to quickly say this before you
Yeah.
apologize for trailing on. Betrayal trauma, the dynamic has to be a reliance. So, like, I couldn't give you betrayal trauma right now. You don't rely on me. There has to be a reliance, a trust, a dependency. However, for this podcast, we can stick to, if you'd like, spousal infidelity.
That's what's going through my head because in my head, I'm thinking obviously partnership, spousal, betrayal, which I hold a lot of space for as well, specifically in the narcissistic abuse space.
Hmm.
Because I work with a lot of specifically women who come to me who are on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse, which is a deep betrayal because this
Oh,
person
yeah. And that's
has
a mind
presented
out.
themselves as something that they're not. But I'm really thinking of this betrayal trauma that so many people walk with that they don't have an understanding of what it is when it comes from the caregiver and the parent.
Absolutely, because listen, again, anything that we have a reliance upon. So we can have betrayal trauma absolutely from our parent. We can also have betrayal trauma from our child if our child is the one taking care of us, if we're all elder, whatever. We can have betrayal trauma from a boss because we're reliant upon our boss or our job. We can have institutional trauma. For instance, if we're working, a lot of betrayal trauma could come from the medical field
Yeah.
or the legal field. I'm counting on you to support me in court, and you did this. There's a big betrayal there. There's also self betrayal. I've talked to a lady before who was like, Mr. J, I'm very healthy. I did the shakes and the exercising and the meditation, and I was still diagnosed with breast cancer. I feel my body betrayed me, or I feel my creator betrayed me. That's betrayal trauma. There's
Mhm.
also, if you're close to somebody who unalived themselves, took their life, suicide, that's a betrayal trauma. I was counting on my dad, and he took his life when I was 15 years old.
You
So
know,
you,
it's so interesting because I actually wrote down self betrayal, right? And I don't even see it the way that you just described it, which is, I've done all these things and then my body betrayed me. I see it more as when we're in survival of whatever it is and we abandon ourselves. That's that intrapersonal coaching and relationship work that you were talking about earlier, where we self abandon and we prioritize other people in order to feel safe or secure in relationship with ourselves or with others, right? So we see that self-abandonment so often as coaches in the trauma space. Would you consider that to be a form of self-inflicted betrayal?
oh, most certainly. And let me just say this. I don't know if you're familiar, or any of your listeners, with what's called betrayal blindness. But if I
No.
can very quickly, and again, I'll give you another analogy if you can stand my
I love the
analogies.
analogies.
Imagine Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. So her biggest thing is, I want to see my grandma. I'm close with my grandmother. I love my grandmother. I want to go visit her, even at the detriment of walking through a scary forest that has wolves in it. I don't care. I have blinders on. I want to see my grandmother. So she makes her oatmeal cookies and banana bread and puts it in her basket, and she's off tra la la to her grandmother's house, in the forest. Well, she knocks on her door, but after she knocks on her door, usually her grandmother says, "Who is it?" or "Come in," or something. She didn't hear anything. Something in her gut, her intuition said something's off. She might not know what it is, but something is off. However, She wants to see her grandmother so bad, she ignores the pink and the red flags. Now, let me just say something. This is called betrayal blindness. Betrayal blindness is actually a term keyed from Jennifer Freed in the mid 90s. And it's a part of our fight, flight, freeze nervous system. And what happens is it's our body's way of protecting us in the moment, which is actually serves us, but it turns out to be our worst enemy. So, anyways, Little Red Riding Hood walks in the house. Grandma, where are you, Grandma?
Natural instinct to not go in.
The instinct that something's off.
That's right. But she's
Absolutely.
ignoring it.
Well, yes, because she wants to see her grandmother.
Right,
She
right.
doesn't want to
Okay.
accept the reality that of any other possibility. So now she walks in, Grandma, where are you? She doesn't hear anything. Something now is screaming louder in her body. She, tames it, whatever. She goes into the back bedroom. Now she knows it's not her grandmother. Grandma, why do you have beady eyes, long jaw, sharp? She knows, but she can't accept the reality. She wants to see her grandmother so bad to the point of her detriment, and then she gets eaten. Okay, the reason I say that is because I can't tell you how many times, and again, we'll just focus on spouse or partner betrayal with
Yeah.
this podcast. I'll hear, you know something, Mr. J? I found a blonde hair in his truck, and I just thought, oh, he's so nice. He probably just gave his coworker a ride home. Or Mr. J, I found her sitting at the coffee shop with her boss, and I just thought, man, she's so nice. She even works after hour. Something inside me knew it, but I wanted to, because here's what betrayal blindness does. It keeps you safe in the moment,
Yeah.
because what's happening is it's toning down the reality, where if I accept the reality of the gravity of what's going on, oh my God, now all my friends and family are I'm going to embarrass them because they know that, our relationship's not working out. Now my kids are going to have to spend alternate weekends, one weekend with me, one with their other parent, one weekend. Now my finances are going to be affected. No, I can't have all that. So how was work today? That's betrayal blindness. But the reason I say it's our best friend and our worst enemy is because once the crap hits the fan and you do accept and reality hits in, now you're not only trying to heal from the betrayal trauma at hand, but you're trying to do so when you don't even know yourself anymore because you disconnected yourself from yourself because of betrayal blindness.
Yeah, we're just that perfectly describes someone I was working with yesterday, right? Where we it's like the truth and you would just so prefer it to be something different that you will create whatever narrative will work for you in the moment in order to continue to work through. And what I find is when we go from that radical awareness to that radical acceptance, not only do we have to deal with the pain and the trauma of what we're going to call betrayal trauma, but at the same time, we're dealing with a tremendous amount of grief and we're dealing with a tremendous amount of shame because, I think it's important to say, like, because I hear this a lot, so many brilliant, off the charts intelligent, high achieving, high accomplished. I'm going to use women as an example. Women who sit on my couch in my office or across from me on Zoom saying, why did I not allow myself to see that? I'm smart. So now there's this shame that they're blaming themselves that, they're part of the problem, and it just becomes this very, very complex scenario. And I think also sometimes that betrayal blindness, I'm curious for you, is part of that sometimes what I call, what I say would be inside our invisible backpack of perhaps we witnessed that growing up, or perhaps we witnessed a parent being on the receiving end of not such great behavior and not setting boundaries and not speaking the truth and not speaking up, where we also kind of marinated in that and witnessed that and observed that. And that also became one of our coping strategies too. So that's always something that needs to kind of be unpacked. It always becomes something bigger than, and I'm putting in quotes because it's not but just the betrayal trauma. It's so many layers. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Listen, absolutely. Which is why when I'm talking to parents that have kids, um, I tell them, listen, when your kids ask you if everything's okay, do not gaslight them. You do not say, "Oh yeah, everything's fine. Everything." No. Now you don't get into details with your kids, but you don't gaslight your kids because they need their intuition when they get older, just like you needed yours now. And if you tell them everything's fine when something inside of them is telling them everything's not,
Yes.
you're setting them up for failure in the future. So
Yes.
so absolutely, you don't gaslight your kids. And I'll tell you something. I tell people this all the time. Now, you're not going to probably find this in any study or any research. This is mine, so you take it with a grain of salt. But in my opinion, that's all, which is worth nothing. In my opinion, I think when we're dealing with betrayal trauma, we're dealing 40% with the here and now, the pain,
Yeah.
the wounds, but we're dealing 60% with those unhealed wounds from childhood, the
Mm.
developmental sleeping giant wounds that woke up. That once I'll tell you something, when I can find, and there has to be a willingness, which we can get onto that. If somebody is willing to do the work from their developmental trauma, their childhood trauma, their previous abuse, whatever the case is, you will find healing skyrockets.
Mm.
um it's well, I won't get into how, but absolutely 40% the here and now, 60% is waking up that sleeping giant of everything that we've allowed to be dormant, to
Yeah.
not see, not address.
It's so interesting when I talk about trauma, you know, people often say, "Well, does everybody have it?" And I say, "Well, let's just use a different word." Right? So, I'm a huge proponent of language, and the root word for trauma is wound, right? That's where the word comes from, the Greek word for wound. And I do believe that growing up, we've all had wounds, right? Like nobody's unscathed from their childhood. Now, whether or not it becomes a trauma is something different. When we talk about something like developmental trauma or complex PTSD, what we're talking about is a very consistent, very chronic, very pervasive set of experiences that leave what I call paper cuts on the heart, right? Paper cuts on the soul. They're so quick, they're so small, they're not even they don't have to be these huge big wounds that we might think of when we hear the word trauma. It doesn't have to be aggression or violence or abuse. It can be not feeling enough, seen, heard, understood, valued, feeling significant. And we know as trauma care practitioners that trauma is not always what happened. Very often, trauma is what didn't happen, but needed to happen from like a Maslow's hierarchy, right? So, like, were my physiological needs met? You and I were talking behind the scenes before we started recording about some of your own lived experience, about some of those physiological needs being scarce: food, water, shelter, safety, security, love, belonging. So when I'm working with my clients, again, like you, nothing evidence based here, but if I had to like throw a number at the wall, I would say I've seen everything you can think of in the trauma space, but the large majority of my clients are coming to me from issues of needs not being met, right? Not feeling enough, not feeling safe. Perhaps there's some physiological need scarcity, but the majority of even, that my needs not being met comes from this safety and security of being able to be me in my household and love and belonging. And I always use this analogy of the invisible backpack. We assume as children that our parents have read the book and done the work on what it means to be a freaking parent. And as we all know, nothing exists. And they're often coming into parenting so with so many wounds themselves that they cannot meet our needs, not because we're not enough, but because they're limited. And we only have the capability before we're 7, 8, 9 years old to make the assumption that it's because of us. So when we're talking about what's happening today, right, that 40-60 split, what kind of relationships did we find ourselves in? Not only that, but how do we relate to other people because of our needs not being met growing up? How far do we overextend ourselves in order to feel important, seen, heard, and understood, valued that it just becomes like a perfect storm.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things you said reminded me of a saying one time that I kind of like, and it said, trauma isn't always about, dealing with stress and dealing with abuse and addressing this and that. It's actually learning how to embrace joy again. It's
Oh,
learning
yeah.
to
I
sit with
always
your,
say we're not, the goal of doing this work is not so you have a wider capacity for life. It's so you have a wider capacity for joy,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because listen,
yeah.
I do a lot of parts work. I don't know if you work in the,
IFS, yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I'm not IFS trained per se. I'm
yeah,
trained
yeah,
by
yeah.
IFS level 3 instructors, but I'm a full proponent of parts work and polyvagal theory. And the reality is that we do develop these parts of us in survival, and they are our greatest companions.
Yes, which is why I say all the time, we have certain wounds in our childhood. And then when we don't heal them, we get older. And just like a costume that we never take off, it almost becomes a part of who we are.
Right.
Uh, and then we present to the world in adulthood of this is just who I am.
That's
And
right.
it's not who you are. It's who you become because you never did the work to take off
Well, I always
the
call it
protective
an
gear.
adaptation, right? So the Janina Fisher, I love her work because she talks a lot about how we just adapt to life's stressors and how we're constantly in survival mode growing up. And the reality is that we are constantly adapting, and we do it at such a young age. We don't remember who we were before, right? And so even some of that quote unquote self-abandonment is in survival, where we actually detach from self and allow another part of us to run that bus and to be the driver of our life, because that's what felt safest and that's what got our needs met the best at that time.
Oftentimes, our adult saboteurs were our survival methods in
So
childhood.
let's talk about that, because that makes a lot of sense to you and I. But you and I are talking at a 301 level here, right? So let's bring it down to the 101 level for the listener. Because I'm thinking of a conversation I had with somebody recently. They're not in a healthy marriage, right? There is a lot of betrayal happening. And as you mentioned, it doesn't always have to be infidelity. From an intimacy point of view, it can be financial, it can be control. I do a lot in the course of control space, power, control, manipulation. And we talked about setting boundaries. And her response was, I've never put myself first. It makes me want to vomit just to even think about putting myself first. I'll never do it. And to me, what I'm hearing is growing up, nobody can meet my needs better than me, myself, and I. And then at some point, I just relied only on myself, but I also ended up having to take care of everybody else because no one was going to take care of me or anything else that was going on. And if I don't take care of it, my needs are not going to be met. That's the sense of the child. It might be rooted in logic or not, but if you see a parent not coping well, you're going to swoop in and make sure that that parent's good enough. So maybe you'll get your food, or you'll get your bath, or your clothes will be cleaned, or you'll have the ability to get to school. And again, there doesn't have to be abusive violence or aggression in that, right? I see you nodding. Does that relate? You're
Yeah,
like, oh my gosh, yes.
one of the like a lot of times when we're children, let's just say our parents give us the biggest attention when we get A's on our report card. Well, we learn, okay, well, mom or dad or whomever is going to, I feel safest. I feel loved. I know I'm not going to be yelled at. I'm probably going to get fed if I go above and beyond to please my parents. So let me cook, let me clean, let me be respectful. And then you take that into your adulthood, people pleasing, and then you are among the wrong people who can take advantage of that. Same thing with growing up with my mother was a raging alcoholic, or my father or my caretaker was a raging alcoholic, so I knew to stay away Stay away from them. If I stayed away from them, I wouldn't get beat. I wouldn't be called names. I could come to the dinner table and stay quiet and just eat. And
Right.
well, now you grow up to become an avoider, and then you avoid things in a relationship, and then now that gets you trouble. So the majority of the time, our adult saboteurs were actually once worked for us, and it's very confusing to the inside into our bodies. Is because, oh, wait a minute, this kept me safe, and now it's actually harming me. So
Well, this is where the parts work is so amazing, right? Because, and I actually do a form of hypnosis known as rapid transformational therapy. So if it happens to be the right tool for the right time, we can kind of go back and start to understand when this part developed. I kind of really take this heavy parts work approach and then dialogue directly with the part under
hmm
hypnosis and
hmm
really start to ask what its role, function, purpose, and intention has been up to this point for the client. And it's always benevolent. And at some point, it's so interesting because I've been doing this for many years. It has a very similar cycle for every single client, even though none of my clients have ever met each other, where we're going through this process of talking to the part. So let's just say it's a part that's a people pleasing part or an avoider part, and there's all these reasons of how and why and where it keeps this person safe. And then at some point I ask this part, how old were you when you came in? I'll use your name into Jay's life system awareness, and I'll hear things like 4, 6, 8, and then I'll say, well, what was going on of that age? And they'll describe it. And remember, this is just the client speaking, but it's under this hypnosis. It's fascinating. And then I say to the client, so I'll use your name, Jay, why don't you speak out loud how old you are? Let's just say for shits and giggles, you're 50 years old.
hmm
And the person goes, 50. And I said, okay, I want you to just sit still for a second and I want you to tell me what you're feeling inside your body. How is that part of you feeling about that piece of information? And everybody says the same thing: surprised, shocked, relieved, exhausted, exhausted. It's done. It doesn't even want to do this anymore. And it almost starts to like naturally unburden. It's not that simple, right? There's a lot of puts and takes, but it's even the awareness of, whoa, like they're not 8 anymore, 5 years old anymore. Like they actually have so much more agency than they ever had when I came into their system. And then we talk about not obviously getting rid of the part, but how can we form a different relationship with the part? I even give the part the opportunity to retire. Like you get to totally chill out now. But gosh, if we need you, we know exactly where to find you. You're valued part of this internal system. But maybe it's okay for you to take a beat. And
Yeah.
there's usually this sense of relief of like, yeah, because I honestly I don't even think it's working anymore. I can
hmm
see it's hurting the person. It's keeping them in this relationship and they're not happy. And it's such a fascinating thing. And the client can't unsee it once they see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the
Parts
value.
work is man, I wish this was a concept that came about long time
Yeah.
ago.
I mean,
Uh,
it's been around for 40 years, but I just don't think it had the groundswell that it has
no,
now.
no, it didn't.
The
But
way all therapists should be
even if people are listening and they're like, well, okay, I don't want to talk to a professional, but is there something I can do at home? I tell people all the time, listen, if you just sit with yourself and I mean, obviously this is a very dwindled down thing, but try to and try to think of a corporate meeting room, a big long table.
too.
Invite all of your parts in. Um, and the first thing I have people do is just walk around the table and listen, observe.
So funny.
Yeah, and then and obviously it's a little process, but as you are disinviting those out of your room because you are the CEO, it's magnificent, it's amazing to see the emotions that come up when people are ushering parts of themselves outside of the room, saying, I appreciate what you did, or maybe I don't appreciate what you did, but you don't serve me anymore and you're welcome to leave and what have you. So even if people don't want to work with anyone who does parts work, you can just do this visual analogy of
It's so
inviting.
funny. I've never heard anybody else use the boardroom analogy, and that's how I see it from my own internal family system. And if I find myself what I'll call it an activated state. So for me, my biggest part, my biggest companion of life has been anxiety, right? So once in a while she'll still reel her head, and I remember last year actually being on a walk and really just being overwhelmed. Like when I get anxiety, it becomes very debilitating. It's like I'm drowning in it. And I remember speaking out loud as I'm on this walk, we need a full company wide meeting stat. And I was like, I need all my parts in the boardroom. And this is the way I see it. And I have everybody shuffle in, and I stand at the front of the table and I say, I understand each, it felt like the inmates were running the asylum in my nervous system. I was
Hmm.
like, you're all running around trying to seek safety for me. I get it. I'm asking everybody to sit down, put their pens down, take a breath. I want to run this meeting. I would like to see what will happen if I get to run the show. And what people don't understand is when you really start to form this relationship with these parts of yourself, right? So we talk about that intrapersonal. Um, you will feel less activation in your system. They will respond.
Hmm.
They want this dialogue. They want this connection. I call it a harmonious reorganization, right? So I understand you thought at a time I was not in the position to lead this organization, but I'm back. And I would like to step back into my role. And I'm not getting rid of anybody. Everybody here has a valuable role, but I'm just saying we need to reorg here.
You're gonna, yeah, yeah.
And because I've been doing it long enough, my parts respond well to this. But you're right. Like if people can just start to visualize it, I've had some clients that see all their parts sitting around a campfire, right?
Hmm.
Or on a beach together, like
Yeah,
kumbaya and some blankets. Like
yeah.
you get to visualize what each of these parts are in your system and bring them together in a formal way
Yeah.
to start to have that conversation.
One of the overall points I wanted to make is that there's a lot of things people could do on their own for absolutely free. Even EMDR, about 85% of people that go through EMDR have probably an 85% success rate. It's very, very, very successful. But if nobody who's listening doesn't want to do an EMDR with a professional, whatever, you can go for a walk. And basically, if you as you're walking, look to the left, the right, the left, the right, the left, the right, and then pause periodically and ask yourself, where's my body? What am I feeling? I mean, when you're initially going for the walk, ask yourself, okay, what am I being bothered with? Where's the wound? Is there a hurt? Then walk, look to the left, look to the right, look to the left, look to the right, and then pause and say, okay, what am I feeling now? So I'm not saying it's going to be none of this would be as effective if you were
Right.
to talk to a professional, but there's a lot of people that reach out to me that say, Mr. J, I just can't afford A, B, and C. What can I do? Same thing with EFT and tapping. Anybody can start touching themselves while they're talking, and basically it's tapping your different parts of your body. Even though I'm feeling stressed, I know today's going to be a good day. Even so, EFT I mean, there's so many things that people can do on their own without having to spend money.
I recommend the tapping solution, which is an app, which I just think is the absolute best. And that is, a guided solution for EFT tapping. And it's not a cheap app, but it's less than one session with me. And you would have it for the entire year. And I actually reached out to them and asked them if they would partner with me. So I am able to offer like my audience and my clients like a cheaper rate than their normal rate, but that is like tapping solution in your pocket. And I call it the break glass in case of emergency situation where, oh my gosh, I'm really feeling activated. I remember I have this solution right here on my phone, and type in whatever it is that you're being challenged with, and they just have literally hundreds of 9, 8, 12 minute tapping solutions that they'll
And
just
the
guide
one
you
thing that's good
through.
about tapping, which is also good about some other things, is that uh, there's a lot of people that get very affected at work.
Yeah,
So one of the things that I try to do is help clients with. These are some of the things, like for instance, you can tap certain parts of your body underneath the table while you're sitting in a boardroom if you're at work. Same thing. Getting back to betrayal trauma, one of the things that people really struggle with are the triggers, the emotional flashbacks. Those will take you to your knees. Triggers after D-Day, Discovery Day, and I give there's a lot of things that people can do to help with triggers when they're home alone, but there's a lot of things you can do if you're sitting at work and you can't
yeah,
bury yourself in ice or shout or scream or punch a pillow. So a lot of these little tools are very helpful for people. But anyways, I wanted to just get back for a second on betrayal trauma.
I
one of
do
the
too.
first
Yeah,
one of the first questions you asked me was, what are the difference between trauma and non-betrayal trauma? And there are there's differences between trauma and non-betrayal trauma, but just for time purposes, I'll just give you three. One of the differences between, say, non-betrayal trauma and betrayal trauma is, number one, it's a secret society. So if you have a parent pass away, or God forbid something happens to one of your children, you can go to your boss and ask for bereavement time. Your coworkers will show up to the funeral and with cards. Your neighbors might bring a casserole. When you discover that your spouse has been seeing prostitutes every other weekend or having an affair at work, you don't you often don't want to reach out to your boss. There's embarrassment, there's shame, there's whatever. And what are you going to do? Say, I need some broken heart time off? There's no such thing. So it's a secret society. That's one of the first differences from trauma, from betrayal, non-betrayal trauma. It's a secret society, which adds to the challenge of healing because you feel so alone. You already feel so alone because you feel ugly and fat and disgusting because you were cheated on, but now you feel so alone. So that's number one. Number two is, with trauma in and of itself, it affects the here and now and the future. So let's just say you get into a car accident. That could be traumatizing. Every time you get into a car, you might have a challenge. When it comes to betrayal trauma, it not only affects the present and the future, but it also affects the past, because now you can't look at photo albums in the same way. You can't drive down the same streets in the same way. You can't pass hotels and restaurants because your partner, your spouse, was in that hotel with somebody. So it affects the past, present, and future. That's how it is. And then the last thing I'll say is that it's deeply personalizing. God forbid if somebody's listening and their parent passed away, or they had somebody close that passed away, that could be traumatizing. That could be trauma. But unless you participated in your death, you can't personalize it. But when it comes to betrayal trauma, it's such a personalization. It's, why wasn't I good enough?
yeah,
Why wasn't I what they needed to be enough? And we all know that it has nothing to do with you. So whoever is thinking that has not, we are 100% responsible in how we show up in a relationship, but we have zero responsibility when somebody goes outside of it. So that's another difference, is that it's personal. We personalize it. So those are three core differences when it comes to betrayal trauma and from non-betrayal trauma. And one more thing I just wanted to quickly say is, and you actually mentioned this earlier, is when people are saying, I'm a smart person, how could I be so stupid? Because of betrayal blindness, which is an actual part of our entire system, which is meant to protect us. This has absolutely nothing to do with our intelligence. It had everything to do with, we were simply living, believing in love. This has nothing to do with you being stupid and not being wise and not being this. And how could I be so, A, B, and C? Um, like Maya Angelou said, I did then what I know. Now I know better. I'm going to do better. So, which is why I say, if you're ever going to rebuild and repair, whether it's with the same person or somebody else, unfortunately, I don't know if we ever live with blind trust. I'm going to be honest with you, but
Mhm.
we absolutely can live with wise trust. And that's actually more fulfilling, if you ask me.
Thank you so much. And that's such a good explanation because I think people do need kind of a clear roadmap, right, of the difference between the two. One question I have for you is, do you believe that there are common denominators among the betrayers? Meaning,
Well,
the real question I want to ask is like, what is going on with someone who betrays another person or is more likely a serial betrayer?
so, okay, I'm going to give you my answer and you may lose some listeners.
Okay.
I equate affairs, and affairs is a broad term. It could be anything from sexual addiction acting out to, I mean, I'm working with a couple right now in their 70s. The husband had a 38-year affair. So, I mean, I'm covering a broad spectrum. I equate affairs to cutting.
Yeah.
People cut because they want to numb, distract, avoid, cope. So when you say, is there a common ground, a common denominator? Yes, people with wounds are the ones that have affairs. People that are happy, healthy, healed. I've never worked with somebody that had an affair that was happy, healthy, and healed.
And
This
so,
is what's,
what
I'm sorry to
is,
interrupt you, but this is why I can't stand the narrative of he's a dirty dog and once a cheater, always a cheater and all this. That could absolutely be accurate and true and stuff, but the narrative is not uh, there's a profound amount of hurt
yeah.
with the person who stepped out, just like there's a profound amount of hurt with the person that was betrayed. Don't get it twisted.
No, I think
It's
it's
a
so
different
good that
set of
you
hurt.
brought it up because I couldn't agree more. And I don't think you're going to lose any listeners because this is what my listeners expect.
Okay.
But the reality is that that is the truth. You know, hurt begets hurt, right? So
Yes.
what is it? So we know we've learned enough about cutting over the years that cutting feels like a release for a lot of people. So, what, in your opinion, is the betrayal? What does that act as? Is it a numbing out? Is it a distraction? Is it self-loathing? Where they're like, what is going on? What are they getting from it? The betrayer.
Well, it could be all the above. It
Yeah.
could be all the above, but here's the deal. A lot of people just say, well, okay. A lot of people just want to be seen. That's number one.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just want to feel validated. When you get into a relationship, and 9 times out of 10, you're getting into, if you're going to get married, let's just say, usually, not all the time, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, you're getting married at a young age, late teens, early 20s. You're together until what, 60, 70 years old? That's a long time. That's a long time. Life happens in between then. You got everything from kids to bills to job loss to people loss to stress. Your sex life isn't always going to be the way it is. Your body isn't always going to. And I sometimes people just say, I got to the point where I felt unseen and unheard, and that's what triggered my wound. Now, the second part is what's difficult to get people to whatever. But let me just say this too. The other thing too I tell people is, listen, um, your current spouse, your current partner would also make you feel alive if you allowed them to. You let the other person make you feel alive. So, let's not get that twisted either. But a lot of times it's just to either not, and it could be all the above: numb, distract, avoid, feel seen. A lot of times I talk to people that are going through their midlife crisis. You know, and it's like, I want to feel young again. So my 23-year-old secretary, she laughs at my joke and chews her gum, and she's got the big hoop earrings, and she waves her hair, and she touches my arm, and my wife doesn't do that, or my partner doesn't do that, or the wife says, when I'm talking with my coworker who's a male or whatever the case is, he looks at me in the eyes and
He
he makes
sees
me feel
me.
I'm worth it. He sees me.
Mhm.
So people just want to feel alive.
No
Um,
doubt. And I think, it's really important at this point to say what you and I are saying is it is clear that the person who's the betrayer has their own wounds. And I want to say this is not to be said to excuse the behavior. If
Never.
your
There is no excuse.
relationship is built on trust, if that's the mutual understanding within your relationship, then what is happening is a breaking of the trust. So you can have an understanding as to why, but we never really want to excuse it if it's not part of whatever it is that you agreed upon within your relationship, right? So if you agreed to have a monogamous, non-open relationship and that's built on trust and honesty and loyalty, and then that is broken, you can understand they have their wounds. But I don't really want anybody going around, well, I know he had such a tough childhood, so like, it's okay. No, it's not okay, because
Yeah.
if you do that, you're abandoning yourself, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to excuse the behavior. One question I have is, in the realm of betrayal trauma, and we're going to talk about the betrayer, where's the intersectionality of that and narcissism, in your opinion?
Well, you know something? Listen, here's the deal. First of all, in my opinion, which means nothing,
I think
I
your opinion means a lot, by the way. I don't think you should keep saying that, because
well, what I'm saying is it's not going to buy you a cup of coffee. I mean, it's not,
listen,
like
it's your personal point of view. I share a
yeah,
personal point of view all the
yeah,
time, but that's why people listen, because they
yeah.
appreciate the personal point of view.
So here's my thing. If you ask me, I think just like I think we're all somewhere on the spectrum of probably autism and Asperger somewhere. Even if we're on the absolute lowest, no detection, no behavior, whatever, I think we all at times could have narcissistic tendencies, even if we're not a certified narcissist.
Right.
Um, so I'm going to be honest with you. I think that, in my opinion, does narcissistic tendencies show up within affairs? Sure. Um, uh, but I think the two are other than that are pretty.
The reason why I ask is because I always see one of the strong traits of somebody who's, I'm going to say, narcissistic by nature, right? I'm
Yeah,
not one that I can diagnose or anything
yeah,
like that. Is this idea of rules don't apply to me,
yeah,
and they apply to you, but they don't apply to me. And there's that lack of empathy. So obviously that's not going to be the case in every single instance of betrayal. But when you find yourself in the situation where they're trying to actually blame the spouse for the reason that they had the affair, and
correct.
they become the victim, and they make the spouse, who is the non-offender, the offender. So I talk about DARVO all the time.
Yeah,
So DARVO stands for deny what's actually really happening, attack, and then RVO is, we're going to reverse the
reverse
victim
victim.
offender order, right? So now all of a sudden, well, if you just, then I wouldn't have had to. And so I think there's this like dental floss line where in certain areas of betrayal, you're also seeing narcissism, because you're seeing someone who's truly narcissistic who is not going to take responsibility or accountability. They're actually going to make you the offender. They're the victim. That's why they had to have the affair. There's no remorse, there's no empathy. And it's okay, because the rules of life don't apply to them.
Yeah,
They're
and I
above
think
the
the big
rules.
difference is if somebody's a narcissist, a true,
Yeah.
then they're going to carry that throughout. And this is why I just want to be careful with that term, because there are people that absolutely will deny, deflect, and minimize. That, I mean, arguably, you could probably say they're going through an narcissistic tendency, whatever. But it also could be for defense purposes. It could also, which may or may not, again, arguably maybe it is, but yes, if somebody is a true narcissist, they're going to carry on that minimizing, deflecting, and rationalizing and excusing throughout the duration.
Right.
But there is probably, with a 99.9% of all people, that initially minimize, deflect, and rationalize, but I wouldn't put them in any position of
Okay,
narcissism.
cool. All right, here's the thing. Someone's listening to the podcast. Maybe they know they've had this betrayal blindness, right? Or their little Red Riding Hood. They have the sense, they have the intuition, but they're choosing to ignore it out of fear of all the things that could occur.
Hmm.
But from this podcast, they're like, I don't want to ignore it anymore. What steps should someone be taking if they can acknowledge and recognize within themselves that they have a situation where either they know they're being betrayed or they've been in this active betrayal blindness?
Yeah, well, very good question. And it's extremely loaded because, as I always say, no healing is a one size fits all,
Right.
and no person's situation is a one size fits all. So I would probably want to know, and I will get to your question, but I'd probably want to know, what are your current support systems? What are the tools that you've learned? What are the tools you think you need? What are your resources available? I mean, everybody's completely different. And like one person, um, uh, confronting their partner could send them into a suicidal spiral, which we don't want. Or one person, I mean, I talked to people who have went to jail because, when they found out their spouse was betraying them, they got in their car and ran them over. So you really want to really, be careful with a lot of things in one size doesn't fit all and all this other stuff. But one of the things that you want to do, and you can do this in many different areas, but in this situation, is what is your needs assessment? Okay. Do you work? Do you need a job? Do you have kids? What kind of support do you need? So you need to do a needs assessment. Would you be in physical danger by confronting this? Would you be, I mean, so first of all, you have to, and everybody's needs would be different based on what they do. Then you want to, I call it the 10-10-10 plan. What's your life going to look like when you start implementing these 10 days from now? What's your life going to look like when you start implementing these 10 weeks from now? What's your life going to look like when you start implementing these, say, 10 days from now? But you have to absolutely, without question, have a strong support system, whether that's somebody that you trust in your family, which is very hard after betrayal because you don't trust anybody, including yourself. Whether that's a professional, whether that's a local Vera house or a women's shelter or a man's shelter, if you need law enforcement behind you. So absolutely, no quick decisions at any point. I tell people all the time, never make any quick decisions. You have time to make the decisions from a solid foundation. But even enforcing boundaries, and let me just say this, one of the problems with telling people to enforce boundaries is that 99.9% of people have no idea what a boundary is or how to get one.
Right.
So, one of the things that I try and tell my clients is write down your values. What are your values? Now, when and it could be 50 different values. Now, hone it down into maybe 10 or 7. These are my core values. Once you have your core values, invert them into boundaries. So, hypothetically speaking, let's just say one of your core values is timeliness. Man, if let's just, I'm talking to somebody and they're like, I will get enraged if somebody's late for a meeting. Okay, then invert that. One of your boundaries is if somebody's going to be in my inner circle, they have to respect my time. Now, boundaries are like religion. It's not to make everybody else behave a certain way, it's to make us hold ourselves accountable for something. Those are boundaries. Now, having boundaries means squat. Enforcing them is what makes the
Right.
difference. So you have to come up with these. This is what I'm going to do if people don't respect my boundaries. First time, I'm just going to let it go. Maybe pray for them, whatever you do. Second time, I'm going to sit down and just give them a nice little reminder. Hey, that really is a pet peeve of mine. Could we be on time from now on? Whatever. The third time, maybe you need to do up the ante, whatever. And this is with a spouse. This is with a partner. This is whatever. Also, boundaries start building up our self-worth, our self-image, and our self-love, which gives us the tools and the momentum to make healthy decisions for ourselves. I don't know if I answered your question.
You absolutely answered the question. And I think the takeaway for a lot of people is don't rush. There is time to be had. It feels like you're on against a run against time, but we're not. And so I think that really the support system is so big. And because we are talking about betrayal, as you were talking about that, one thought I had was if you just can find one person to be able to share with authentically, um, and this is the important part that I'm hearing in my head is not just without judgment, but without self-judgment. The self-judgment sometimes is so much worse than the judgment we could get from anybody else. And so, sharing with someone is the first, would you say, is one of the first steps of being able to even just speak it into existence.
Oh yeah, because listen, we cannot change what we don't acknowledge. The hard part about this, though, and I'm sure you know this, is that when you don't even trust yourself,
Mhm.
because listen, when you go through betrayal trauma, this is the other thing that's a little different from betrayal trauma rather than non-betrayal trauma, is when you go through betrayal trauma, you just don't lose trust in the person who betrayed you. You now start wondering, who else is betraying me? And it's to the point, depending on the person's background and other stuff, you can't even go grocery shopping without thinking, is somebody in the next aisle trying to listen to my conversation or ready to jump on me and pounce on me and hurt me? You don't know who's out to get you.
Yeah.
Once you are betrayed from somebody that you loved and trust the most, now you're thinking, is my parent trying to bamboozle me? Is my boss trying to get out on me? Is my next door neighbor out to your whole, and there's reasons for this, which I don't know if we have time to get into,
Yeah.
but
I think we should talk about the reason for it.
okay. Okay, a couple things. Number one, our amygdala, which is the almond shaped area of our brain, that is our alarm system. And that it's pretty much its only job is to keep us safe, keep us alive, keep us safe. Um, when we are betrayed, what happens is, I don't know if you've ever been to the circus or a local fair and they have those whack-a-moles where the heads come up and you got to whack them. Okay, do that to your amygdala. It is now firing off when it doesn't need to be,
Right.
which is why people get into states of hypervigilance. I'm going to be honest with you, with all of my childhood trauma, and you're talking to somebody who's done work. And when I mean work, I still have hypervigilance. When I go out to eat with my family to this day, Stacy, I make sure no matter where I sit, I can see the entrance. I can see, okay, if somebody comes in with a gun, am I able to turn this table upside down and protect my family? These are the crazy things that go through my mind because once your amygdala's whack a mole, you can manage it, but you're forever going to look at life through different glasses once you're traumatized. um okay, where was I? Because now my
We were
ADHD is
talking
kicking in.
about the amygdala.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Why?
And
Yes.
the other thing too that gets affected is our hippocampus. Our hippocampus is what's in charge of like location, time, memory, maybe associating even emotions with that, depending. Now what happens is, so listen, predictability keeps us safe in life.
Right.
So, like, okay, we know, hey, I got married in 2010. I had my first child in 2012. I went to Mykonos, Greece in 2016. This Tuesday is taco because we have Taco Tuesday on Tuesday. My mother's birthday is January 4th. So, when we predict things, it keeps us safe.
Mhm.
And so, in our brain is a long filing cabinet of all of our files in life. And that's in our hippocampus, and because predictability keeps us safe. These are all our filing. We know ABC. Well, when we discover a spousal betrayal or any type of betrayal trauma, what happens is that person pulls that long filing cabinet out of our brain, walks up a mountain on a windy day, and turns it upside down.
Mm.
You got files scattered all over the place. Now you're questioning what's real.
That's right.
You're questioning dates. You're questioning. Then, what the other thing too that's difficult is once you start to heal, which that's a process in and of itself. It's like trying to raise the Titanic. Once you start the healing process and you actually are in a position where you can just, your nose is above water and you're like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can find joy somewhere. Maybe I can put my life together. When you go to put those files back in your drawer,
Mm.
you don't know where they go because your time is all off because your hippocampus was screwed up. So this is what I mean by like, many parts of your brain now our brain is malleable. Our
Yeah.
brain is absolutely malleable, so it can heal. But I think we learn how to manage trauma. I don't. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if we can ever completely heal from trauma. But I'm going to say the other thing too. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing,
Mhm.
because there's so many lessons of the lessons after trauma. um uh I have wise trust now, no more
Yeah.
blind I have wise trust. Even I've managed my hyper vigilance, so even though, I'm still hyper vigilant, I think it actually works for me in a lot of ways. I mean, I make sure my kids are by my side, in a driveway, or a parking lot, maybe when another person isn't that hyper vigilant. I always say this: betrayal trauma, especially if you're going to repair and rebuild, betrayal trauma is like talking to somebody who had a heart attack. And oftentimes, after you talk to somebody who had a heart attack, let's just say 2 years later, 5 years later, so they're in the best shape of their life. They have the best mottos. They have the best attitude. They are physically fit. Because this shook up their system and realigned their priorities.
Yeah.
And if people do want to heal, which I'm going to tell you something about, 93 to 97% of all of my clients do repair and rebuild with the person who broke trust.
Mm.
Their relationship is far stronger now
Mm.
than it was even before the
I
trauma.
call it post-traumatic growth.
Absolutely, without question.
Right. I mean, listen, we can't avoid trauma. We can't avoid life is just a series of experiences that are divinely designed for us. And many of them are incredibly challenging and adverse in
Incredibly.
nature,
Yeah,
right? And so we can't avoid getting the paper cuts. If you do, you're going to be living a very, very shallowed, small existence. However, we can heal from the paper cuts, right? And we can heal the wound. So even when the wound is touched, it might be tender, but it doesn't have to have the same sting. Um, we could go on forever.
yeah,
Could we
yeah,
not?
yeah, absolutely.
What is the one thing that you would like the listeners to know when it comes to betrayal trauma?
Okay, so let me just say this, because I've talked about how we personalize it. One of the things that I would like people to know is that you have to take 100% responsibility in who you are and how you show up in relationships. But you have to make a promise to yourself that you don't take one iota of a percentage for somebody betraying you. They had many options. They could have left you. They could have sought therapy. They could have shared with you. There was many doors they could have walked through. They chose the most hurtful door.
Mhm.
So take responsibility for how you showed up in the relationship and heal whatever that needs to be healed, but take no responsibility for somebody stepping out. And the last thing I just want to say is this: one of the things that we need to do, and this is just not in our relationships, but starting back in childhood, write down all the lies you ever believed. For example, you went into from school one time and you were telling your mother about your school day, and she was busy cooking or cleaning and she didn't have time for you. So the lie you believed is that I'm a nuisance. I take up too much people's time. You need to write it, because I'll tell you something: when it comes to trauma, one of the biggest ways we suffer is believing the lies that we told ourselves.
No, I actually have a book behind me written by Marissa Peer, who I learned hypnosis from, and the name of the book is "Tell Yourself a Better Lie."
Oh my God, I never even heard of that book, but I love it.
Yeah, tell yourself a better lie.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll tell you something too, and this goes hand in hand with this. Is I tell people all the time: listen, in the history of mankind, humankind, womankind, whatever, in the history of mankind, nobody has ever died from a snake bite. Nobody has ever died from a snake bite. What people die from is when the venom gets into their veins and gets to their heart. So when we're betrayed, man, we get venom. We get venom. You have to immediately do the work to prevent that from venom from getting into your heart, because it will affect you mind, body, and soul for the rest of your life.
Love it. Mr. J, if people are intrigued, how can they learn more about you, your work, your book? Where do people find information about you?
I have the easiest website, I think, on the face of the earth. It's mrjrelationshipcoach.com. But listen, even if people never want to hear my voice, see my face, read whatever, I have a lot of free resources on my website, from videos to you name it. So again, mrjrelationshipcoach.com. Just come for the free resources, if nothing else.
I love it. And all of that will be in the show notes. I am so eternally grateful for your time today and bringing awareness to this type of trauma known as betrayal trauma. I think we really did give the listeners a lot to think about. Guys, again, if you're interested, you want to go to mrjrelationshipcoach.com. Mr. J, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Stacey.